morning, children. So let's get into today's topic. Are cells flat? Now, this is a question because when we observe the cells under the microscope, they seem to be completely flat, isn't it? So, because you're seeing from the microscope, the cells they look to be a bit flat, but actually they are not. You see that they are the two-dimensional pictures, right? They are like 2D, but actually they are not flat cells. They have length, breadth and thickness. When you view it from a microscope, you can only see its length and also you can see its breadth. So we all may feel that they are a bit flat, but not, they are not actually flat. They are having the length, the breadth and thickness. This you can easily study, or you can see when you see the cells under the microscope, especially the plant cells. When you see the cell wall, if you decrease the intensity of the light in the microscope, you can see the thickness of the cell wall. So when you see the thickness of the cell wall, we can confirm that it doesn't only have the length, breadth, but also it has the thickness. Thus we can come to a conclusion that the cells are not flat, they are three-dimensional figures. So now the next topic is, where do these cells come from? So that's a question which is in our minds, and all we are going to answer that question. So basically there are two scientists. The first one is Matthias Jacob Schleiden and second one is Schwann. Matthias Jacob Schleiden was a botanist and Schwann was a zoologist. By the time of Schleiden and Schwann, there were a few scientists who said existence about the cells and all, but these are the two people who really recognized that their cells are present and few organisms are also made up of cells. Schleiden and Schwamm are the people or the two scientists who claimed that the organisms which belong to the plant kingdom and also animal kingdom are made up of cells. This is not very easy to tell because they have to make a lot of generalizations, they have to make a lot of observations before claiming this statement, whether it is true or false. So they are the first people, they're the first scientists who to claim, to confirm that the organisms which belong to the plant kingdom and also animal kingdom are made up of cells. So this was not at all a very easy statement to make, and this is the base for the cell theory. The complete credit of a cell theory or proposing the cell theory goes to Schleiden and Schwamm. So it's more than 200 years later, Robert Hooke discovered the cell. You all know the process, how he discovered the cell. So it is only after 200 years. So now we can confirm that this Schleiden and Schwamm, these are the two people who proposed the cell theory, and which says that living organisms which are in the plant kingdom and animal kingdom are made up of cells. So these two people, they said that the organisms are made up of cells, but they could not explain the way how they are formed. So they only told that these organisms are formed from cells, but they never explained how these cells are formed. So now it's very evident that these two people formed the cell theory. The observations made by Schleiden and Schwamm were the base of the cell theory, and whereas they could not explain how the new cells are formed. So how these new cells are formed, they could not explain that. So in the year 1855, there was another scientist whose name is Rudolf Karl Virchow, basically a Russian scientist. He is the first person to tell that the cells are formed from the pre-existing cells. The cells are formed from the pre-existing cells. So now how these cells are formed? The answer for this is they are formed from the pre-existing cells. Now what are pre-existing cells? So let me draw this for you, and you can observe it from the diagram. So now you can see here, this is one cell, and this cell has given rise to two cells, and these two cells has given rise to four cells. That means these, now if you take these two cells, where they are formed from, they are formed from a cell which is already existing. The cell which is already existing is a cell. Now we are calling it as a pre-existing, because it existed before these two cells are formed. So these two cells are formed from the cell which is already existing. So that's why Virko said that the new cells which are formed from the pre-existing cell. Now you can see that this cell is already existing, and these two cells are formed from this cell. Again, these two cells are formed from this cell. These two formed from this cell. So on the whole, he said that these particular cells are basically formed from the pre-existing cells. All the new cells are formed from the pre-existing cells. So now this theory is also added to the cell theory. So now you can say there are two statements in the cell theory. The first one is all living organisms are composed of cells and products of cells, and the second one is all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. So this is the first unit which you have learned till now. So the unit, it concludes as tells about you the cell theory, which is proposed by Schleiden and Schwamm and also Rolf Karl Virchow. So these three people, they laid the foundation for the studying of the cell theory. So children, this is your first unit, and basically we have completed the first unit, and now tomorrow we'll go ahead with the second unit. See you all. Have a great day.